Hello everyone, this is part 14 of What If Naruto Was a Demigod in the Justice League, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
It's no good, my clones can't see anything. There's a shielding spell cast around the island. Looks like Hades is aware of our arrival. Naruto said. He had sent several of his clones hanged into tiny insects to spy on the floating island and gather intelligence, but they could not get close to it due to a sphere of magic that encapsulated the entire island within. I guess our only method is to brute force our way in, he concluded. When he had been young, he would have not bothered with checking up on the place beforehand at all, he would have just smashed his way in, jumping headfirst into danger. He had smartened up with the passing of time and he had become cautious. However, being cautious did not mean he had become a coward. If left with no better alternative, he could very well blow everything up with brute force like before too. What are we waiting for? Let's go, Kyuubi said enthusiastically. With the fox on his shoulder, Naruto and Wonder Woman started flying towards the floating island in the sky. How are we going to break their shield? The princess asked. Are you going to cast some of your powerful spells at it? Naruto and Kyuubi looked at each other and then started grinning widely. It's not the first time we see a fortress covered by a spell or energy shield. We've even designed a special technique for breaking them, he said proudly. Diana made an impressed sound. Oh, you never fail to surprise me with how versatile your techniques are. Controlling the elements, gravity manipulation, cloning, flying, becoming invisible, laying traps, shapeshifting, teleporting, self-regeneration, and even healing spells for others. Is there anything you can't do? I'm envious. 1 century of continuous training coupled with the experience absorbed from countless clones would make anyone just as strong. It would be weirder if I wasn't versatile and strong after such a long time, he said and grinned at her teasingly. Flying to some distance away to give him space, she said. Well, go on, let's see what you've got. Naruto and Kyuubi chuckled again at the same time as if they were laughing at an inside joke known only to them. As he was floating in the air, he suddenly started to flash through an incredibly quick and long series of hand seals. That sequence of hand seals performed at such an insane speed was impressive by itself, to speak nothing of what was about to come. Wonder Woman's heart started beating faster in anticipation. He said in a deep voice, Ninpo, World Destroyer Big Ass Fox no Jutsu. Then, he grabbed the fox on his shoulder like it was a potato and yelled. Yeet. Under Diana's disbelieving eyes, he yeeted the fox towards the island as if he was a pitcher throwing a baseball on the field. Naruto, what the hell? Diana was not one to swear. Naruto could count on the fingers of one hand the times he had heard her say a bad word. But this time she was shocked. Before any of them could say anything else, the tiny furball in the air suddenly became absolutely massive. With a roar of laughter, the enormous Bayou slammed into the shielding spell encasing the island. The even more absurd part was that the entire floating island shook terribly and the sphere of magic shielding it was shattered like glass. She turned to look at Naruto. He was laughing his ass off so hard he was having trouble maintaining his flight. He had hyped it up as a special technique designed for breaking barriers, and even formed a very long and impressive sequence of hand seals making her anticipation rise off the charts. She thought she was going to witness an awe-inspiring sight or an apocalyptic spell no weaker than a nuke. Not such a barbarian method. Finally managing to get his wheezing laughter under control, he wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. It's called trolling. We do a little trolling sometimes. A vein started pulsating dangerously on her temple. Naruto, you. The situation was so incredulous that she could not find her words. They were going to have a life and death battle against a god and there he was, pulling pranks and dying with laughter from his own joke. She did not know how to even react to that. But her thoughts were cut short when a demonic roar made the sky tremble. Kyuubi began his rampage. Asterism. What are you playing at, Hera? Why would I trust my back to a vicious and labile woman like you? The rather deep and dignified voice came from a very tall and muscular man wearing black armor and a dark red cape. He had shoulder-length black hair and his sharp black goatee fit the image of the dark ruler of Underworld. He was Hades. The beautiful woman narrowed her eyes at him and said sharply, "The last offspring Zeus made out of wedlock was Helen of Troy. At the end of the Trojan War, Zeus vowed to me on the river Styx that he would never spread his seed to anyone else. After that, I knew about his indiscretion with Hippolyta and many other women over the years. But I was willing to turn my head the other way as long as he never made another child with anyone else besides me." At her words, Hades clenched his fists. Although thousands of years had passed, he had never forgotten how Zeus raped the woman he used to love and how he ruined his life. That was the very reason he had sided with the Titans against Olympus during the war. And that was the reason why he had been trapped in Tartarus ever since. To this day, he was filled with rage. I paid close attention to Hippolyta and the Amazons after the incident. But Hippolyta had never shown any signs of pregnancy and the daughter she made out of clay did not seem any different from the rest of the Amazons. 2,000 years passed and I have never suspected that her daughter was not made of clay but that it was her flesh and blood. Zeus's flesh and blood. I can no longer tolerate his infidelity, his lies. I can no longer tolerate him. He needs to die. I will kill him and his accursed offspring even if it's the last thing I do. The goddess's face was twisted from anger, looking like she was on the edge of insanity. Although Hades knew how manipulative and cunning the Queen of Olympus could be, the hatred in her voice and the jealousy in her eyes at that moment could not be faked. Furthermore, it was not the first time Hera had tried to dethrone her husband, so he did not doubt her willingness to kill Zeus either. Regardless, Hades had learned his lesson from the past. Despite how powerful the Titans had been, even with him choosing to support their side, they still lost the war against Olympus. So many of us have tried to defeat him in the past. Even the Titans could not do it. Do you think just the three of us stand a chance against the entirety of Olympus? Speaking of the three of them, Hades looked through the window of his castle. Outside, in the large courtyard of his outer fortress stood a massive being. It was like a creature out of a nightmare. Several 100 feet tall and wide, the gigantic being only had the legs and the torso of a humanoid. The rest of his body was that of a monster. He had 9 draconic heads, several pairs of fleshy wings, over 20 scaly arms, barbed tentacles were growing out of his back, and snakes came out of his neck like the mane of a lion. It was none other than Typhon, the son of Gaia and Tartarus, the god of monsters. Typhon is very powerful, indeed. But I hope you haven't forgotten Briareus, have you? How he squashed your little rebellion in the buds and how you were hanged by Zeus in the sky as punishment. Briareus is still loyal to Zeus and he is more than a match for Typhon. 1. Hera's face burned with shame at being reminded of her humiliation in the past. Things are different now. She spat through gritted teeth. Taking a deep breath through her nose to calm herself down, the goddess continued. After nearly 2,000 years, the people of Earth no longer worship the Olympian gods. Without the power of faith, Zeus is much weaker than before. If he had been confident of his power, he would not have sent his half-blood of a daughter on a suicide mission to deal with you in Tartarus. He would have come here himself. As for Olympus, it's not as united as before either, not by far. Ares and Hermes have involved themselves completely with the mortal world, Athena only cares about her Amazons, and Poseidon would be more than willing to take my side against Zeus like before. The rest of the gods are either indifferent or simply too weak to be relevant in the grand scheme of things. Hades sniffed condescendingly. Even at his peak, Zeus never dared to step foot into the realm of the dead, where all the Titans slumber, or he would have tried to kill me a long time ago. Taking one deep look at Hera, he said slowly, "Fine, I will play along. I have nothing to lose anyway. But mark my words, Hera. If you betray me, make sure you kill me for good too, or I will spend the rest of my eternal life to hunt you down." The goddess was unfazed by his threat. They were about to shake hands to seal the deal when the entire fortress quaked terribly. A deafening sound of glass breaking was heard and then a demonic roar shook the sky. Asterism. When the roar reverberated in the skies of Tartarus, for a moment, it was like time stopped. Every soul, every demon trapped in that hell froze up. Over 1,000 feet tall and with 9 enormous tails, it was a crimson behemoth. Typhon's 9 draconic heads started at the titanic demon in front of him in disbelief. He had never seen a creature bigger than himself. He was already several hundred feet tall, but the demonic beast ahead of him dwarfed him so much that he looked like a dog in front of an ox. What is this? What is this feeling? He could not move. His 24 of scaly arms were paralyzed. An uncomfortable feeling traveled down his spine. It was as if needles were pricking at his flesh, making him numb all over. For the first time in his millennia-long life, the god of monsters experienced a new feeling. It was fear. Terror. Die. The Bayou roared. An enormous fist crashed towards the god of monsters with the power of a meteorite. A terrible boom rang and the several miles long island was smashed into smithereens. In the distance, Wonder Woman momentarily stopped in her tracks in shock. For the first time, she got to see what a terrible power QB could wield. Involuntarily, her heart trembled. She knew that they were on the same side and that they cared about each other dearly as friends. But the feeling of fear creeping into her heart was beyond rationality. She understood then that the fox's arrogance and pride were not without reason. Then how strong is Naruto? She could not help wondering. She was seeing the two of them bickering on a daily basis, and it was more than once that she heard the blonde teasing the fox with the fact that he kicked his ass and the fox never contradicted it. Hades is not alone, Naruto said, startling her awake from her thoughts. The pieces of the broken island crashed into the ground below with a deafening bang, raising enormous clouds of ash and dust in the air and covering the sky for miles. But when another terrifying roar rang, the shockwave it created instantly cleared away all the ash, dust and debris floating in the air. Amidst the remains of the obliterated island and the fortress on top of it, two human-looking beings stood together, surrounded by a protective sphere of magic. What? The otherwise dignified-looking Hades had lost his composure, and Hera's beautiful face was pale from shock. Trapped in Tartarus for millennia, Hades was not exactly up to date with the powerful beings outside of his realm. As for Hera, she had never paid any attention to the mortal world, as mortals were beneath her notice. The two of them had been completely unaware of QB's infamy in the universe. Not far from them, a disgusting mass of flesh and blood was wriggling on the ashy ground and making disturbing sounds. A small draconic head appeared from it, but it quickly increased in size, and right after that, the rest of his body was regenerated like a miracle. It had been a terrible strike, one that had blown up the entire island. Taking a direct hit from such a devastating power was enough to obliterate any lesser being. But he was Typhon, the god of monsters. Hydras, dragons, chimeras, and other creatures known for their self-regeneration abilities and resilience were his offspring. As the god and ancestor, Typhon possessed all of their abilities but much stronger. Overcoming his initial fear born out of instinct at facing a predator larger and more powerful than himself, after regenerating his body, Typhon roared in rage. His 9 draconic heads opened their maws and black hellfire shot at the gigantic fox in front of him. But his attack was met with mocking laughter. With a mere flick of his enormous tails, a gale of wind not any weaker than a tornado snuffed the hellfire like a feeble candle. Naruto made a clone and used it to transmit a message to the fox. Kurama, don't toy with him. Kill him fast. Keep in mind that I can't supply you with chakra this time. You're on your own. Turning his attention towards Wonder Woman, he asked. I assume that's Hades. Who is the woman next to him? His wife. Yes, it's Hades. As for that woman, it's Hera, she said stiffly. His eyes shone with killing intent and he laughed. She delivered herself right to us. What are the chances? He was about to launch himself at them, but she suddenly grabbed his arm from behind. Naruto, don't take them lightly, she said seriously. I don't know about Hera, but the Justice League had fought against Hades once. He overwhelmed us. Superman, Martian Manhunter, Batman, Flash, and we didn't stand a chance. He defeated us all at once. We won in the end only by a fluke. 2. He looked at her for a few seconds without saying anything. Then, he brought a hand to her face and gently tucked a strand of her sweaty hair behind her ear. I know, we talked about this already. Don't worry, I'll be careful, I promise. Despite that they were about to enter the battlefield, Diana momentarily closed her eyes and leaned into the hand caressing her cheek. I'll take care of Hades and you of Hera. You okay with it? Fine by me, she answered. I'll engage first and break them apart. Divide and conquer. But don't strain yourself. Play it safe and just stall for time until I kill Hades. After that, we'll join hands and kill Hera too. Diana started to glare at him. You're underestimating me, aren't you? Knowing how proud she was of her skill and strength as a warrior, he raised his hands to placate her. No, I'm not. He wanted to say that he was afraid for her safety, and that he did not want anything bad to happen to her. But he stopped himself in time, sensing that he would only be digging his grave deeper if he implied she was not strong enough to keep herself safe. You be careful too, okay? He finished in a small voice. Having made her point, Wonder Woman did not insist on starting an argument. She nodded at him seriously. Naruto clenched his hand into a fist and raised it in front of her. Diana looked at his extended fist and then back at him, understanding his wordless suggestion. She raised her fist too and bumped it against his. Her eyes widened in surprise when a rush of feelings and thoughts flooded her. His unconditional love for her. His desire to spend the rest of his life with her. His secret thirst for a good battle against a worthy opponent. His desire for her to be happy. His respect for her. His worries for her safety. His fear of being alone. At that moment, the princess understood him completely. When he moved his fist away, their spiritual connection broke off too. But she could not tear her eyes away from his, overwhelmed by that unprecedented experience. She had never been connected to someone on a spiritual level like that. Let's do our best, he said and smiled at her softly. She nodded her head vigorously, not trusting her voice to speak at that moment. Then, he turned his attention back to the battlefield. He had never been worried about the fox. As his lifelong best friend, Naruto knew exactly just how powerful Kyuubi was. His only worry had been for Diana. But after sharing a fist bump with her, he was no longer anxious about her safety anymore. He understood her feelings and thoughts perfectly as well. His eyes became sharp and his demeanor abruptly changed. The aura he exuded became like an unsheathed blade, and a cloak of yellow-red chakra appeared around his body as he entered his tailed beast chakra mode. Then, he blurred out from existence. An instant later, a silhouette teleported right between Hera and Hades, completely bypassing her protective sphere of magic. Konoha Senpu. The heels of his combat boots suddenly smashed into Hera's and Hades' jaws at the same time as Naruto performed a whirlwind flying kick. It was one of his former comrades' favorite taijutsu moves, the speciality of Might Guy and Rock Lee. The two Olympian gods were kicked in the face and hurled away in opposite directions as if a truck had smashed into their faces. Diana, he shouted. The Amazon princess's answer was to erupt with a powerful battle cry. Hera had yet to even crash on the ground after being kicked in the face when Diana's body slammed into her with her golden shield. Spittle flew out of her mouth when the wind was knocked out of her and her body left a sonic boom behind from the force of the shield bash. Physically stronger than Hera and more adept in battle, Hades righted his body in the air and flipped back to land on his feet. You dare strike a god? He yelled in fury. But Naruto did not entertain him with a verbal answer. He conjured a swirling sphere of energy above his head, a Udama Rasengan that was even bigger than his own body. Faster than the naked eye could follow, he appeared in front of the god and pushed the enormous Rasengan into him, intent on grinding his body into a bloody paste. However, when he smashed the Udama Rasengan against Hades, it was as if a regular person tried to push a train. The god had caught his Rasengan with one of his hands effortlessly and then slapped it away with the other one as if it was a beach ball. A large crater was carved into the ground when the big ball of chakra blew up. Lifting himself up from the crater, Naruto frowned. He was unhurt, but that degree of magic resistance shown by the Olympian god and his insane physical strength was not good news. If I had access to natural energy, he thought disgruntled. While in his six-path sage mode, he could lift hundreds of tons and level mountains with his punches alone. He would not be afraid of a physical confrontation even against a god. The current situation, however, required him to avoid meeting Hades' hits with his body. Nevertheless, he was no longer a one-trick pony like in his youth. He had other methods of dealing with his enemies too. Hades' face lost its human appearance and transformed into that of a demon. His skin became gray, two horns grew out of his forehead, his teeth transformed into fangs and his eyes became red. Opening his mouth, an enormous fireball came out from it, like a fire breath. Naruto rolled to the side and jumped to avoid it. Fireball after fireball was shot from Hades' mouth, but he was too agile for them to meet their mark. Enraged at his futile efforts, Hades stomped his foot. The ground cracked and ruptured and skeletons started crawling out. They were not just human skeletons. There were also centaurs, serpents, enormous centipedes, and even a few very large bone dragons. Furthermore, a buzzing noise was heard in the next moment and the pitch-black sky of Tartarus became dark red in the distance. Red because of the red eyes of tens of thousands of demons rushing to answer the call of the god. Floating in midair with his arms crossed, Hades looked down at the masked mortal man arrogantly. Do you realize now how powerless you are? You are but a man. But this is my realm. And I am a god. Attacking the god of the underworld in his own domain. How foolish. Despite the overwhelming number of undead beings surrounding him from all sides and the tens of thousands of demons closing in from the distance, Naruto was perfectly calm. He was even relaxed enough to peek at the situation on the other side of the battlefield. The battle between Kyuubi and the god of monsters, Typhon. It could not even be called a battle. It was a one-sided beatdown. Typhon was doing everything in his power to attack his foe, shooting hellfire, creating vortexes of wind, spitting clouds of poison and even breaking off parts of his body to create monsters to aid him in battle. But it was all for naught. A mere swipe of the demonic beast's tails was enough to squash the monsters he created into a gory paste. The vortexes of wind could barely ruffle his crimson red fur, and the hellfire and the clouds of poison could not even get into Kyuubi's proximity as the fox's roar produced shockwaves capable of flattening and blowing away everything in their path. In front of absolute strength, all of Typhon's abilities appeared to be insignificant. Typhon had already died and regenerated himself nearly 10 times in less than 10 minutes. Noticing Naruto paying attention to the fighting between the two gigantic beings instead of focusing on him, Hades started to become angry. The man in front of him was too relaxed. Either he's too stupid to know he's about to die, or he is confident that I can't hurt him. At that thought, his ire flared. To think that there would come a day when a mortal would treat him with such disrespect. The bone dragons that he had summoned opened the gigantic jaws and their breath attacks covered the sky. Fire, poison and lightning incinerated and melted everything in their path, not caring about allies or foes. Despite the ferocity of the dragon breath attacks, a dagger suddenly pierced through them unaffected and Hades barely had enough time to lean his head to the side. Though the tri-pronged dagger only left a bloodied scratch on his cheek, Hades was unconcerned. It was going to heal up in a matter of seconds. However, in the instant that the dagger flew past his head, with a hand on the handle of the tri-pronged dagger and the other hand holding a purple-colored yin-release Rasengan, Naruto appeared behind him like a ghost. The god had not even noticed his actions until the sphere of yin chakra slammed into the back of his head. There were no explosions. Hades could not even feel any pain. He was not wounded at all. But when he wanted to turn around to face his enemy, his heart jumped to his throat. He could not control his body. He was paralyzed. The Yin Rasengan's purpose was not to injure him but to immobilize him. An aura of lightning magic burst behind his back and his fear seemed to double his strength. His body started to shake and it looked like he was going to regain control over his movements in a matter of seconds. Damned magic resistance. This is ridiculous. Naruto cussed. But he did not stay idle. His tailed beast chakra mode transformed into a cloak of yellow-red lightning. It was a version of the third Raikage's lightning armor adapted to his usage of Kyuubi's chakra. A grinding attack like a Rasengan isn't a good match because of his incredibly high magic resistance as a god. I need a piercing attack. Without my 6 paths, this is the strongest piercing attack I have. He clenched his right hand into a fist and a large portion of the lightning crackling around his body gathered to his fist. Then, he extended just his index finger. It was the last and most powerful stage of Hell Stab. It took only 2 seconds for him to power up his attack. But due to his panic or maybe because of a rush of adrenaline, the god somehow managed to regain a part of his control over his movements. At the very last moment, when Naruto's lightning attack was about to stab through his back, into his heart, Hades twisted his body around. The hell stab landed on his shoulder instead of piercing his back. A sharp grating sound was heard as the lightning jutsu was unable to pierce through the black pauldron covering Hades' shoulder, only managing to scratch it a little. The god kicked him in the gut with all his strength, blowing him away like a cannonball and bursting into loud laughter. This armor was forged for me by Hephaestus, the god of fire and blacksmiths. Your puny magic attacks can't even leave a scratch on me. My armor will parry everything you can possibly throw at me. Ha ha ha. Naruto coughed a bit from the kick that landed into his gut and pulled himself up from the crater his body made when he crashed, but he was not wounded. So his armor is just as tough as Diana's bracelets, huh? Lightning suddenly discharged from his body in a radius of 100 feet around him, turning all the skeletons in his range that were trying to attack him into dust. Sharp swishing sounds reached his ears and he quickly disappeared with a body flicker movement, evading the arrows shot by several dozens of centaur skeletons at the same time. But then, it started to rain with fire from above. A vanguard of several hundred demons from the immense horde in the distance had managed to enter the battlefield much faster than he had expected. Naruto unexpectedly stopped in his tracks and slapped his hands together in a prayer. Over 100 arrows whistled through the air in his direction, but his Reiten no Yoroi, lightning armor, stopped them all just a few inches away from piercing his body. In the next moment, a terrible gravity encompassed an area of over 600 feet around him. Just like he had once killed the squad of Gordanians that had tried to capture Starfire in Jump City, he used the same technique this time too. The hundreds of demons spitting fire at him from above suddenly lost their ability to fly and crashed into the rocky and ashy ground, to the death. But his victory was short-lived because right away, several bone dragons fired their breath attacks at him. The entire area was obliterated. Both Naruto and the skeletons and demons around him were reduced to cinders. Hades was just about to celebrate his triumph when he was suddenly kicked in the back of his legs. Before he could make sense of the situation, he had watched the mortal die with his own eyes. How could he still be alive? The god found himself on his knees. Following that, a huge Rasengan smashed into the side of his head, into his temple, and exploded. Slightly dizzy and with a bit of blood flowing from a scratch on his temple, he tried to stand up, but a kick to the face threw him back onto the ground again. Then, 4 shadow clones suddenly popped into existence and grabbed him each from one of his limbs. With a scream of anger, Hades yanked his arms and legs with all his strength, but the 4 clones holding his limbs suddenly became over 100 times heavier. It was an earth release technique that could increase an object's weight many times over, depending on the need. Granted, since Naruto could not use his Sage mode in Tartarus, the shadow clones were crushed by their own weight, unable to even stand on their feet. Regardless, they achieved their purpose, to pin Hades down. Floating at a high altitude in the air above Hades, Naruto raised his hand above his head and 2 other chakra arms grew out from his cloak. A purple-black sphere of chakra started to take form in the palm of his right hand. It was different from his previous Yin Rasengan. Way different. Just the size alone was even larger than Naruto's own body. It was a tailed beast bomb. Magic resistance. You can parry all my attacks. Parry this, you fucking casual. Hades screamed. It was a scream of fear and despair. For the first time in its existence, the realm of the dead saw light. It was as if a sun was born. For several moments, everything became white as a blinding light robbed everyone of their sight and a cataclysmic explosion boomed. It was like a nuclear bomb. Over 1,000 feet tall and wide, and with 9 equally large tails, QB lived up to his moniker as a destructive force of nature. Hydras, chimeras, dragons and other monstrosities that had instilled terror into regular people and heroes of ancient times alike were being slaughtered like helpless chickens by the demonic fox. The god of monsters, Typhon, was growing desperate. Never in his existence had he fought against such a terrible creature. He had even battled against Zeus, on his own, 2 times in the past, and he had more than put up a fight against the king of the Olympian gods. But now, it was like he was a child trying to fight against an adult. Why won't you just die? Die! QB screamed, thoroughly enraged, and smashed Typhon's body again into a gory mess. He had killed him several times already, but the god seemed capable of regenerating himself from the tiniest scraps of skin. 5 massive claws stabbed through the god's still regenerating body, making him let out shrieks of agony. Typhon's 18 eyes all revealed fear and urgency when he realized QB's intention. The claws were lifting his body towards a gaping maw filled with 2 rows of razor-sharp fangs. The beast wanted to eat him. The titanic fox was so huge that it would finish eating the god's hundreds of feet tall body in no more than 3 to 4 bites. Gritting his teeth, one of Typhon's 24 arms suddenly morphed into a blade, and then he hacked at his own neck. One of his 9 draconic heads was severed. He had cut his head by himself. What the hell? Momentarily, Kyuubi stopped and stared in confusion at the god of monsters' actions. Typhon did not wait for him to catch on to what he was doing. Before the fox could react, while still being stabbed through by the 5 claws, the god grabbed his severed head and used 8 of his numerous hands to throw it away. The severed draconic head flew like it was shot out of a cannon. In the next moment, the god of monsters' body shriveled and turned into black sand. A roar of anger came from Kyuubi. He realized that he had been tricked. The god had abandoned 95% of his body and escaped through his severed head. Typhon was running for his life. "You think I'll let you get away?" Kyuubi bellowed, and the land quaked as he broke into a mad dash towards the flying severed head in the distance. It had to be said that at over 1,000 feet tall and nearly 3,000 feet long, Kyuubi was so enormous that just taking a few steps was enough to cover several miles. After a few seconds, the spot where Naruto was battling Hades was already far behind him. It was impossible for Typhon to escape. But when Kyuubi's large hand was about to grasp the draconic head, he suddenly stumbled and lost his balance, almost falling to the ground. His blood red fur started to lose its brightness, becoming a pale red, and a wave of dizziness attacked his mind. The black sand that Typhon's body had dissolved into after cutting his own neck was not mere sand. If Kyuubi had been capable of observing microscopic lifeforms, he would have seen that countless tiny leeches had buried into his skin and started sucking out his vital energy. From over 1,000 feet tall, Kyuubi's size started to decrease at a speed visible to the naked eye. Meanwhile, Typhon's severed dragon head quickly grew a torso and limbs, fully regenerating itself. While Kyuubi could not see the countless tiny parasites leeching his chakra, he noticed their effect straight away. A vast amount of chakra was abruptly expelled from his body, and the dense swarm of black insects was blown away like a cloud. Then, the expelled chakra ignited. In the distance, the god of monsters vomited blood as all the leeches, which were living parts of his body, were incinerated. "So this is a god," the Bayou said to himself gravely after getting rid of Typhon's leeches. While he was still large, not any smaller than Typhon, Kyuubi's size had decreased drastically. He was almost 2 times smaller than before, standing at only 600 feet in height. Typhon had siphoned away a third of his chakra in a matter of seconds. The fox understood then that he had underestimated the god of monsters. For the first time, their battle entered a lull. Typhon and Kyuubi glared at each other vigilantly. The disparity in their sizes was not as large as before anymore, but the 2 titanic beings had gained a healthy dose of wariness towards the powers and the abilities of the other. Their eyes were pinned on each other and their bodies tense, but neither of them wanted to break the ice. Both of them were waiting for the other to make the first move and take advantage of it. "I must have killed him more than 10 times. Kyuubi thought seriously. But he keeps reviving himself every time. He also drained nearly a third of my chakra, and Naruto can't supply me with more like in the past. I can't afford a battle of attrition. If this drags on, I will lose." He growled in annoyance at that thought. As the strongest Bayou out of his fellows, and after managing to even destroy a planet, Kyuubi had become very proud and confident of his power. However, he was not stupid, nor was he conceited to the point of ignoring reality. After having a taste of how dangerous and insidious Typhon actually was, he immediately became cautious and put his pride in the backseat. "If I lose, he'll never let me live it down." He could already picture Naruto in his mind, laughing his ass off at him. Becoming the butt's joke for the blonde was the last thing he wanted. While the 2 giants were having an intense stare-down, the dark sky of Tartarus unexpectedly brightened. A blinding white light forced Typhon and Kyuubi to close their eyes. Then, a deafening explosion was heard and an incredibly powerful shockwave followed, carrying a heat wave that set the air on fire. It was exactly the chance that the fox had been waiting for. While the sky was still bright white and the tailed beast bomb transformed into a huge mushroom cloud, Kyuubi opened his mouth. Black, purple, and red particles of energy started to gather between his opened jaws in the form of a sphere. His fur started to shrivel up and disappear into thin air, revealing his raw flesh, and his body began shrinking down rapidly. As he was continuing pouring chakra into the tailed beast bomb, he became unable to maintain his large size anymore. By the time he stopped powering up his Bayudama, Kyuubi became no bigger than 100 feet tall. When Typhon finally regained his sight, an enormous black sphere of energy was the only thing he saw. The fox was nowhere to be seen. The tailed beast bomb was twice as large as the fox now. It was too late for Typhon to run, and the sphere of magic was way too large for him to even think about dodging it. With no other choice left, the god of monsters shouted in desperation and curled himself on the ground. A chitinous husk quickly grew from his skin and tough scales appeared on top of it too. Right before the huge-tailed beast bomb reached him, Typhon finished transforming himself into a creature resembling a grotesque pangolin. It was his strongest defense. For the second time that day, Tartarus was illuminated by a blinding light. The entire realm trembled from the absurdly powerful explosion. It was much more powerful than the tailed beast bomb fired by Naruto a few moments before. For more than 10 miles around them, everything was vaporized. It took a long time for the explosion to die down. In the humongous crater, a tiny pile of flesh was all that remained from the seemingly unkillable god of monsters. Living up to his name as the ancestor of hydras, the remains of Typhon were still wriggling. He was still alive. If left to his own devices, Kyuubi had no doubts that the god would eventually recover even from such a devastating attack. But he had no intention of giving him any time to regenerate himself. I have to eat this. The fox made a disgusted face when he grabbed the still alive and wriggling mass of flesh from the ground. He closed his eyes and covered his nose with the other hand, then, he threw the remains of Typhon into his mouth. He gagged and almost threw up. However, as disgusting as it looked, he forced himself to not think about it and swallow it. It was his key to godhood. It was the only way to stop the power of faith from driving him insane. Asterism. The Amazon princess let out a loud battle cry. Hera had yet to even crash on the ground after being kicked in the face when Diana's body slammed into her with her golden shield. Spittle flew out of her mouth when the wind was knocked out of her and her body left a sonic boom behind from the force of the shield bash. The goddess crashed into a nearby cliff, breaking it into smithereens. The princess had not held back her strength when she bashed the goddess with her shield. Even after smashing into the cliff, his body continued to roll and tumble onto the ashy ground like a ragdoll. She may have been the queen of Olympus, but that was due to her being Zeus's wife. She was not known as a battle-hardened goddess. In terms of actual strength in battle, she was far below the likes of Hades or Typhon. Nonetheless, she was still a goddess. Her divine power blasted outwards and her body stabilized itself in midair. However, her success was short-lived. The goddess only had enough time to cast a protective spell around her before the warrior princess slammed her round shield into her again. Wonder Woman seemed dead set on not giving the goddess any chance at reuniting with Hades. Encased in her protective bubble of magic, although she had been hurled away through the air like a soccer ball, Hera was largely unhurt. But, by the time she finally stopped her momentum, she realized that she was already 5 miles away from the remains of the collapsed flying island. Hera was a woman of a rarely seen beauty, one said to be on par even with Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, and Athena, the virgin goddess of war and wisdom. However, at that moment, she looked haggard. Her white regal robe was smeared with ash, she lost her golden crown, and her wavy brown hair was now shaggy and filled with ash and dirt. Her otherwise dignified face was twisted in rage. I'll make you regret the day you raised your hand against me. I'll make you suffer for millennia to come. I'll have you watch as I sell the rest of the Amazons into slavery and, in the end, I'll make you beg of me to grant you sweet release of death. That I swear on my own name. Hera yelled. It was as if she had lost her mind to her rage. The Olympian goddess let out a shrill scream and chunks of the ground broke off and started to float around her. With another scream and a wave of her hands, the large boulders were hurled towards the Amazon princess. It was like a rain of meteorites. Wonder Woman clenched her hands around the straps of her golden shield and braced herself for the impact. There were too many of them for her to dodge them all. Boulders weighing several tons smashed against her golden shield with reverberating booms. Despite her formidable physical strength as a demigoddess, the several tons heavy boulders were hurled with such velocity that she was pushed back greatly by every impact. Eventually, the hail of rocks and boulders ended, but Hera used her divine power to rupture the ground again. Wonder Woman launched herself at the goddess, but she was met with another barrage of rocks and boulders right away. Helplessly, she could only hold onto her golden shield and tough it out. Despite her disdain for a half-blood, like Diana, Hera understood that she would be in mortal danger if she allowed the princess to get close to her. Hera was not a warrior, she was not adept in direct battles. She was feared by the rest of the gods due to her venomous and vengeful personality. She would lay curses on mortals from the dark and manipulate others into doing her dirty work. But when it came to a frontal battle against a warrior demigoddess, Hera could only resort to using her divine power and telekinesis to keep the princess at bay with everything she got. Hera's plan was to hold the status quo and drag the time until Hades or Typhon defeated their opponents and came to her aid. Is this all that the mighty queen of Olympus is capable of? Throwing rocks like a savage barbarian? Diana said mockingly. She was trying to get a rise out of her. Hera had already thrown 4 waves of giant boulders and rocks at her. Despite how violent each hail was, it could not hurt Wonder Woman at all. She would dodge most of the boulders and use her shield to protect herself from the one that she could not dodge. But Hera's purpose was achieved. The princess could not close in the distance between them. Now, it was a stalemate. The goddess did not fall for her bait. She kept herself surrounded by floating large rocks and watched her every movement like a hawk. When Wonder Woman lunged at her again, she immediately shot a barrage of boulders at her. However, this time around, Diana put her shield on her back and went against her bare-handed. When the boulders were about to smash into her body, she slammed her bracelets against each other. A deafening sound like that of a gong was heard and the shockwave it generated blasted all the incoming rocks and boulders into bits. Every piece weighed several tons but they were disintegrated like sand. A sonic boom was left in her wake as the Amazon launched herself at the goddess. She twirled her golden lasso above her hand once and threw it at Hera to ensnare her. However, at the very last moment, Hera cast a short-distance teleportation spell, reappearing 400 feet away from her previous spot. Wonder Woman let out a grunt of annoyance at seeing the goddess slip away at the last moment. Hera and Diana stood face to face with a distance of several hundred feet between them, glaring daggers at each other. I really need to make Naruto keep up his promise and teach me some of his spells and techniques, the princess muttered to herself. She was frustrated at how one-dimensional her skill set was. Her physical strength, her toughness, and her fighting abilities were undoubtedly formidable, but if she could not get into close-range combat she would be left like a sitting duck, like in the present. While Hera could not harm her in the least, neither could Diana get close to her and kill her. While they were glaring at each other, the dark sky of Tartarus was suddenly lighted up by a blinding light. It was as if a sun was born in the realm of the dead. Hera was momentarily shocked and the extremely bright light blinded her. However, Diana had expected Naruto to launch an outrageous attack like that sooner or later. She was not overly surprised. Instead, she realized it. This is my chance. Her hand wrapped around the handle of a weapon strapped on her back. She unsheathed her god-slaying sword. The muscles of her back, shoulders and arms became taut as she raised her sword above her head with both of her hands. Then, she used her entire strength to throw it. With her eyes momentarily blinded by the nuke-like explosion of the tailed beast bomb in the distance, Hera could only hear, not see, the sharp object piercing through the air. A scream of pain burst from her mouth as a sharp blade lodged itself deep into her stomach and even protruded through her back. The burning pain coming from having her stomach eviscerated overwhelmed her senses. It was the first she had felt such terrible pain. She had never been wounded so grievously in her entire life. She was not accustomed to pain. But those few moments were more than enough for Wonder Woman to appear by her side like a phantom and capitalize. Her lasso of truth wrapped around Hera tightly, preventing her from teleporting away. The goddess was still dizzy from pain and had yet to come back to her senses when Diana grabbed the handle of the sword and stabbed through her stomach. In the next moment, the Amazon princess's white and golden armor was splattered with a large amount of blood, painting her red from head to toe. Her face cold and her eyes betraying no hesitation, Diana had mercilessly cut the goddess's body in half with her god-slaying sword. Asterism. Both QB and Wonder Woman had taken advantage perfectly of the unexpected blinding light created by Naruto's tailed beast bomb and ended their battles, killing their respective foes. However, it looked like Naruto himself had not managed to finish the job. After the blinding light faded away and the devastating ball of chakra exploded and transformed into a giant mushroom, Naruto was left speechless to realize that Hades was still alive. No, even more than that, he was practically unscathed. Oi, oi, give me a break, he could not help muttering. At the bottom of the miles-wide crater left in the wake of the tailed beast's explosion stood two people. Hades was on the ground, unconscious, but otherwise seemingly unharmed if the rising and lowering of his chest was anything to go by. The other person was standing protectively in front of him. It was an athletic and beautiful woman with long black hair and silvery eyes. An open-faced golden helmet covered her head and a bronze-colored armor set protected her body. A long spear was stabbed into the ground, next to her, as her two arms were grasping tightly the straps of a wide, circular golden shield. She reminded Naruto of his Diana. They looked eerily similar. The woman's breathing was laborious and her arms were shaking. She was the one who had taken the full brunt of the devastating tailed beast bomb, using her shield and body to save Hades from certain deaths. Who are you? Naruto asked vigilantly. He was not one to underestimate a person who managed to tank a tailed beast head-on and survive. He was sure she had to be a goddess of some sort. Before the woman could reply, the sky was once again bathed in a blind light and an explosion even more powerful than Naruto's tailed beast bomb rocked the entire realm of the dead. The shockwaves were so powerful that even Naruto dared not take them lightly. The yellow-red chakra cloak surrounding his body flared as he fortified his defenses. That crazy fox. It was Kyuubi's tailed beast bomb. The fox had even sacrificed a large part of his body to power it up before firing it. Though his fight against Typhon took place more than 10 miles away, Naruto could see the land below him melting from the heat wave. He became a little worried. Was that monster really that strong? To think Kurama would be forced to fire such a powerful Byudama, he probably doesn't have much chakra left if any at all, he thought. Making a cross-shaped seal, 4 clones appeared by his side and then disappeared with a body flicker movement. He had sent them to check up on the fox and confirm his safety. When the blinding light finally died down, he flew down and landed not far from the place where Hades lay unconscious with the armored woman protecting him. Who are you? Why are you getting in my way? He asked again. Despite that her body was weary and she looked worse for wear, the woman tried not to show any signs of weakness. With her round golden shield in her left hand and holding her spear in her right hand, the woman kept her guard up. I am Pallas Athena. I am the Olympian goddess of war and wisdom. Naruto stopped in his tracks. He felt the beginning of a headache. She's one of the 5 patron goddesses of the Amazons. The hell is she doing here? Momentarily, he was at a loss for what to say. I mean no harm. I do not wish to battle against you. We are not enemies. Naruto looked at her silently for a short while. That sounds nice and all, but I can't just take the words of a stranger as truth now, can I? If you truly mean no harm, wait a few moments. My partners will be here soon. Very well, the armored woman expressed her agreement. Then, the two of them waited in silence. Meanwhile, Naruto had all sorts of thoughts going through his head. He could only wait for Kyuubi and Diana to return to his side. Kyuubi would be able to tell whether she was speaking the truth or not, and Diana would be able to confirm whether the armored woman was really who she claimed to be or not. Wonder Woman was the first to arrive. He was taken aback at the sight of her. Her hair and her armor were soaked in Hera's blood and her face was smeared with still wet blood too, despite her attempts at wiping it away with her hand. Are you okay? He asked worriedly, but he did not continue looking at her, keeping his eye pinned on the armored woman and the unconscious Hades instead to not give them any chance to pull off some funny move. I'm perfectly fine. This is Hera's blood. She got what she deserved, Diana said. But then, her face betrayed her feelings of surprise when she saw the person standing next to Hades who was lying unconscious at the center of the crater. Lady Athena, she asked in wonder. The armored goddess finally lowered her guard and let her shield down. Diana, Athena acknowledged her greeting with a smile. It is good to see you. Just then, Kyuubi also arrived at the scene, carried on the shoulder of a shadow clone. He had returned to his tiny form as a fox cub. Everything good on your side, Kurama? Naruto asked. Bastard wouldn't die. I lost count of how many times I destroyed his body, he kept resurrecting. I had to use nearly all my chakra to kill him. It will take me weeks to accumulate it back. Kyuubi grumbled and jumped from the clone's shoulder onto the original Naruto's shoulder. Despite the fox's grouchy words, he was not able to fool Naruto. He knew that Kyuubi was actually very excited. However, it looked like the now tiny fox was extremely exhausted. He did not even care to ask about the newly appeared woman standing by Hades' side. I'm so tired. I need to sleep, Kyuubi said. The fox had unshakable confidence in Naruto's strength. He was not worried that the blonde would be unable to handle things on his own if he slept. Was that monster a god? Or do you need me to save Hades up for you to eat him? The stoic face of the goddess of war briefly twitched at Naruto's words. He was talking about killing Hades as a matter of fact, as if her presence there was irrelevant. Kyuubi shook his head slightly and mumbled. It was the god of monsters. I learned of it after I ate him. Alright then, you go take a nap. Diana and I will handle things here, Naruto said and patted him gently on the head. The little fox cub made a soft growl of comfort at having his head caressed. Then, he moved on his shoulder, closer to Naruto's neck. He curled up in a tiny ball of fur and buried his little snout into his fluffy 9 tails. Kurama fell into a slumber. His body began to assimilate the god of monsters' divinity. Lady Athena, why are you here? Wonder Woman asked with a bit of hesitation. I have come to Tartarus at the orders of Zeus, to kill Hades. Has Zeus changed his mind and sent you to stop us? Although she no longer worshipped the gods, proof of that was the still wet blood that splattered all over her armor and face, Diana was still respectful towards the patron goddesses of the Amazons. After all, the Amazons' survival depended on them. Zeus has not changed his mind. But I intend on starting a coup d'etat, Athena said, and I wish for Hades to join forces with me against Zeus. Hades does not deserve to die. He may have his faults, but he is 10 times a better man than Zeus ever was. Naruto and Diana were startled. Athena was Zeus's favorite daughter. They had not expected her to say that. You appear to be very surprised, the goddess remarked. In truth, it is not the first time I tried to take my father's throne. I have also tried it once in my youth. Back then, I joined hands with Hera, Apollo, and Poseidon and we almost succeeded. But I was still too young, too weak, and too inexperienced. We failed. 1. He looked at her suspiciously. With Kyuubi in deep slumber, he had no way of checking if she was speaking the truth or not. I can sense that you don't trust me, the goddess said and looked at Naruto. Her silvery eyes were clear and pure. But this is a matter of life and death for us, the Olympian gods. If Zeus is not eliminated soon, many of us will perish. What do you mean by that? Who in the world can do such a thing to you? You are gods, Diana said, not quite able to believe it. The god of evil, Darkseid, Athena said seriously. But Darkseid is dead. The Justice League killed him a month ago. Wonder Woman denied it. Athena shook her head. Darkseid is far more powerful than you realize. More powerful than Zeus himself realizes. Nobody understands how dangerous he really is. What the Justice League killed was merely an avatar. It's not the first time Darkseid was killed. How is he resurrecting every time? It's because it was just a vessel that he used to interact with the mortal plane of existence. When one is killed, he can just create another. Darkseid's true form is on a completely different level. He is not just the god of evil on Apocalypse. Is the god of evil of the entire universe. It is only the restriction imposed by the source that is stopping him from leaving the dimension of the gods and conquering the entire universe. 2. After making a short pause, the goddess continued. Darkseid had set his sights on Earth several thousand years ago when he came to Earth for the first time. I have warned Zeus many times, but he does not want to listen. He is too confident in his lightning and thunder. His arrogance has blinded him. He does not realize that he has grown weaker. He does not realize that I, alone, am already just as powerful as he is. Mortals no longer worship him. He has been forgotten. Yet he does not want to accept the idea that someone could be more powerful than himself. 3. But sooner or later Darkseid will find a way to squeeze more of his true power through the gap between the dimensions. I do not wish to sit around and wait for our doom. I do not wish to see Zeus drag all of Olympus to death with him. If he is so strong, why is he so interested in Earth? Why would someone like him care that much about such a tiny and insignificant planet? I don't understand, said Naruto. When looking at the scale of the universe, Earth was indeed just one of the numerous planets inhabited by a sentient species of living beings. In Naruto's eyes, there was nothing special about it. If anything, technology-wise, Earth was rather backwater, decades or centuries behind other civilizations such as Almarak or Thanagar. He could not understand what exactly made the god of evil so obsessed with Earth. He believes that Earth holds the anti-life equation, a magical formula that will give him control of the minds of every intelligent being in the world. Seeing as Darkseid's true body can never leave his dimension, possessing the anti-life equation is the only realistic method through which he could one day achieve complete control over the entire universe. That's why he will never give up on Earth. His conflict with the Justice League is just secondary. The anti-life equation is the thing he desires the most. So what do you plan on doing now? Naruto said, I will lead the Olympian gods into another dimension. Our departure is long overdue. The people of Earth no longer worship us. There is no need for us to remain here and put ourselves in mortal danger. We have nothing to gain from it. Diana asked, then what about the Amazons? What will happen to my mother and my sisters after you leave? My intention is to take the Amazons with me, Athena said. But I will not force anyone to follow me. For those who do not wish to leave the Earth, my blessing will allow them to continue living the natural lifespan of a regular human. That is the most that I can do for them. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.